Sure.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Palmer. Thank you for listening to us today. I'm here with Janie Lacy. She's a licensed psychotherapist, and we're going to talk a little bit about therapy and divorce. Hi.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
I appreciate you coming and talking with us.
Absolutely.
So, a couple of things. First of all, most people going through divorce experience what's called situational depression as part of the normal grieving process over all the losses that the end of a marriage can bring. If not dealt with appropriately, can situational depression linger for much longer after the divorce?
You know, when we think about couples that get to the divorce process, it's something that they didn't expect. Most people get married and they expect that I'm going to have my family, we're going to ride out the sunset together. So when divorce happens, it's usually because there's something that we would call traumatic, which would be a big T. You know, sometimes it has to do with something that just kind of takes one person by surprise, that they can't work through it. And the other is what we look at is what we call little T's, or little traumas. It's like the little cuts along the way that you just can't repair it. So when they get to the place of divorce, it's like a tornado has gone through their house. It has
dripping water turning into a flood.
Exactly. So when it happens, most people go through a grief process, which is very normal. But what we'll see sometimes is people will get stuck in part of the grief process. It could be anger, it can be denial, it could be any of those things. So once a divorce is final, as far as the legality of it, and they now have their parenting plans and all those things in place, and they create a new normal, then all the things that were delayed because they're in survival mechanism during the actual divorce process can now come like a full ocean hits them. So sometimes if they've had low-grade depression, or they were dealing with depressive thoughts, or it's kind of like a zigzag. They can be feeling good, okay, there's resolution, we're moving towards resolution, or you know what, I have good days or bad days is what some of our clients will say. So then once they get through that process, when it hits them, they can get stuck because now, okay, I was in survival mode and now I have to create this whole new life, and I really didn't think through it. And if they didn't think through it, then they can get stuck in depressive states or anxiety, and then they can have a lot of types of things that can help them not thrive. Because divorce, yes, it can be a tragic thing, but it doesn't have to be. So their survival mechanisms that they had before the process is now going to come to fruition after. So if they were not taking care of themselves before, they're not going to take care of themselves after. So when we bring people through the therapy process, we're not necessarily talking to them about the actual divorce process. We're helping them understand their coping mechanisms, their survival mechanisms, because all of that stuff comes to a head when we're in a traumatic state. So it can definitely linger on after the divorce process, and a lot of times people are ashamed, so they don't go for help, or they get help when it's the last resort, and that's sometimes, unfortunately, usually when we see them.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Timing-wise, you know, someone realizes their marriage is not going to work out, they have to get a divorce. Is that the time to start therapy, or is it afterwards when you're seeing that lingering emotions are happening, or does it depend on the person?
Well, all of that. So I think the best time is to have a support system, and sometimes that can be a licensed therapist, or it can be a good best friend who's mature, right? Because we can have support systems and they don't help us, or it could be your religious community. I think the most important thing is that once you understand, okay, life is going to be changing, that you want to have a support system. But what happens is people will hold it, they don't share, and they kind of go through life until they really know that this is what we're doing, and then they share. And they've already had anxiety, they already had depression, they're not present for their kids, they already can have a negative effect that we're now trying to unwind because of the shame that happens, or the embarrassment, or whatever they may be feeling. So what we would recommend is being proactive. As soon as you know I'm getting ready to go through a life change, and a divorce will be a life change, that you get the support you need. And if you don't have a healthy support system as far as family or friends, then licensed therapy, meeting a licensed psychotherapist or counseling would be what is recommended.
So talk to me a little bit about in the counseling process. You know, sometimes people hear of counseling, never have experienced it. So that very first phone call, I know often for my clients, the first phone call to me as a divorce lawyer is one of the hardest. Sometimes a therapist can be the same thing. First call to you. What do you recommend to say, pick up that phone, give it a try? What kind of encouragement would you give people in that, making that first step to go through therapy?
Totally agree with you that if they haven't had any history with therapy or counseling, a lot of times they have stereotypes about counseling or therapy, that there's something wrong with me and that I have to have help. So once they get past that, they'll realize that we all need therapy. We all go through life transitions, and it's to be able to have someone objective that has the tools, resources, and the skills to get you out of the fire in the most healthy way to survive, where you can actually thrive. So calling, and I would say to make sure that that therapist specializes in whatever area you need to specialize in, because sometimes the harm can be when we go to generalists and we feel like we haven't connected, then we say, oh, well, I'm not going to go back to therapy. So I think out the gate, the recommendation would be is to do research, to set up complimentary consultations with the therapist, ask the right questions, ask them if you've seen my case before, have you worked with someone like me. I think is a good way to give them confidence in getting into a therapeutic process.
And I've seen too, if you don't connect with the first person you've talked to, it's okay to try another therapist too, correct?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, therapists are working for you as the consumer. So making sure that you have the best fit, because it's like cutting your life open and you're like, here I am. You're talking about things that a lot of people may not know about you that could be close to you in your world. So you want to make sure that you feel safe, that there's a therapeutic alliance there, that they're specialists in the stuff that you need them to be specialists in.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
It's an investment.
Same thing with divorce lawyers. I tell my clients I don't want to pressure them to hire us. They need to feel comfortable with their divorce lawyer as well as with their therapist, and finding the right fit is important.
Absolutely. It's an investment in time and resources.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.